Today we're here with the authors of the paper Analyzing Social Interaction in Organizations, a Roadmap for Reflexive Choice, published in the July 2025 issue of the ORM Journal. Linda and Avital, thank you for being here.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yes,
We're happy to
so
be here.
with our interview today, we are talking about the background story of this paper, the author's motivation behind this paper, their experience with the review process, as well as their perspective of the current research and how to move this research forward. So Avital and Linda, first of all, could you share with us some highlights of this paper and how it can help scholars in their research?
Great. Okay, so I think I'll start. Um, so the paper is about analyzing social interactions. And that means that for qualitative scholars who are conducting interviews, and especially for those who have observational materials such as team meetings or management meetings or informal interactions or organizational events, stuff like that that they collect in their research. Our paper offers multiple pathways for analysis that allow the qualitative scholars to inductively um, um, drill in and take out different interpretive understandings and I think is aimed to allow more of an interpretive wealth, you can say. The paper, just to say very briefly, the paper contains a matrix of 4 by 5, so 4 dimensions of analysis: content, communication patterns, emotions, and roles, over 5 levels of analysis. So it's the individual level, the dyad level, the group, the organization, and society. So just to briefly elaborate about that, we assume that interaction is more than just what we're talking about right now. It's not just about content. It's also about how we communicate, the emotions that are there, the roles that we take or that people give us. Um, and we also assume that as we are interacting, different social levels are there at the same time. So, for example, if we take our own interaction at the moment, there is the content of our conversation, right? So we're talking about our paper. If we take what we have here at the moment, so there are the particular persons that are here in the interaction, each of us coming from our own worlds and bringing it with us to the interaction. There are the dyadic dimension, and so, for example, Avital and I have known each other for a long time, and we're working together, and that can affect, what's going on within the interaction. And there is the group dimension, so all of us together and what is occurring within the interaction. There is the organizational level. So, for example, we're conducting this interview in the context of ORM is the organization, and there are probably do's and don'ts or certain taken for granted understandings within this organizational sphere that enter our interaction. And there's the cultural, social, broader sphere that is there and that is also guiding us, even if we're not aware of that, or maybe we can resist certain things that are there in the societal sphere. But this societal sphere also enters our conversation or our interaction. So the framework tries to capture all that, and we locate these 4 dimensions of analysis and 5 levels of analysis in this matrix when the intersection between each dimension and level creates a particular cell. In this intersection of level and dimension, we offer in the paper empirical markers for scholars to build on when they analyze their material. For example, analyzing emotions at the individual level involves looking at emotionally charged vocabularies, nonverbal vocalization, such as laughter or crying or speech rate or tone of voice, among others. And analyzing emotions at the group level involves other things like repeated expressions of these things that I mentioned among participants, but also following emotional tones as they change over time, the ways emotion rules are expressed, etc. So this is just to give a taste of the different empirical markers for every intersection between dimension of interaction and level of analysis. And lastly, I just want to mention that within our framework, we also offer principles for analysis, three principles. First of all, the idea that interaction is dynamic, so it changes from moment to moment, and therefore, as we follow the different dimensions of interaction, um, we suggest following the way these dimensions change from turn to turn. For example, how does content change when it moves from one turn to the next of the interaction? Or in what way do communication patterns or emotional expressions change along time as the interaction unfolds? The second principle is the idea that interactions have results, have consequences. So we offer scholars not to only track the process of the interaction, but also the consequences of the interaction. What happens at the end of a certain interaction? What type of mutual understanding do we form? What type of emotion rules are established at the end of the interaction, etc. And the last principle, or the third principle, is the idea that within the interaction, there are multiple modalities that we need to take into account and see how these multiple modalities are involved within interaction. For example, the way the room is designed, the way people's bodies move within the room or are positioned vis-a-vis each other, etc.
Yes, and I'm very excited to know more about this paper. So, what motivated you to study social interactions in organizations and start working on this paper?
So the main thing that motivated us was actually our concrete necessity, our concrete need. So when we started working on this paper, we were both in our PhD phase, and both were in the data analysis phase, more specifically. And during that time, we both felt that the tools or the methods that we had for analyzing interactions were just too little and unsatisfying. So we had data about including interactions that we observed during our fieldwork, ethnographic fieldwork, and whether these were informal interactions like a hallway conversation or a smoking area conversation, or more formal structured interactions like formal meetings or an organizational event. What happened during the interaction felt to include much more than what people just talked about. And we started away from looking for concrete solutions about what to actually do, so we can analyze these rich materials that we collected. And so we met. As Linda said, we know each other a long time ago, and we met when we were PhD students. We were together in a joint PhD student research study group that discussed ethnographies, and each meeting we discussed a different topic that one of the participants raised. And in two of these meetings we had at the time, we discussed analyzing interactions, and that was another motivator to look for ways to analyze interactions, to look for methodological papers that were relevant for us. And what we discovered through this process of research and looking for materials is that most of the materials, the methodological materials for analyzing interactions in organizations, but also beyond in general, were very spread. So they were very spread around various and multiple methodological literatures, such as ethnomethodology, symbolic interaction, psychodynamics, system psychodynamics, linguistic ethnography, and so on. And some of these were really not accessible. And it takes time to really read in depth and try to understand what these papers actually provide as empirical markers that one can use for analyzing. So we saw this as an opportunity to create a methodological framework that would be accessible to researchers that want to analyze social interactions.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. What struck me the most at the time was my experience as a scholar analyzing group interactions, and my experience as a group facilitator, which was what I did at the time outside my doctorate studies. And I also taught group facilitation at the time. And as a group facilitator, I felt that I had a lot of things I could rely on to analyze the groups that I facilitated, and also as I was a supervising group facilitators, I would easily help them unravel what really or what happened underneath the surface as people were talking, but what were the group processes? What happened beneath the surface? Um, and and as a scholar, as a researcher, that wasn't immersed within these different schools that Avital mentioned, my automatic way of looking at the group interactions that I collected was analyzing the content of the interaction. And I felt this was really unsatisfying. I felt that the analysis didn't capture the wealth of the interactions that I observed. Um, and when, on the other hand, when I turned to analyzing these research interactional episodes through the tools that I had as a facilitator, I also felt that this wasn't right because as a facilitator, I was actually relying on theoretical tools, right? So especially psychodynamic theory or theories about group processes, etc., that would help me understand why people would do that and not do that. And as a researcher, I felt obligated not to do that, not to build on um, on existing theories to interpret my data, but to try to think what is there, um, and to be attentive to the processes bottom up. And so this experience of a gap was another motivator to on top of what Avital described, to study deeply the different ways we can analyze interactions and broaden the scope of scholars of how can we approach this as scholars? How can we conduct an inductive study, focusing on what's there and not on pre-existing theories that we come with, and at the same time see the wealth of what's going on there. Yeah.
Yes, thank you both for sharing about kind of like the journey of this paper. And I think it's very insightful when you, as scholars, realize the gap in the methodology, in existing methodology, and strive to fulfill that gap. So, what is your experience with the review process, and how did the paper develop through the review process until its published state?
Vital, do you want to take that?
Yes, I'll address that. Well, we actually learned quite a lot. We learned that there is great commitment in ORM among reviewers to maintain values of qualitative research. I mean, to learn about research that is derived from a position of discovery, that is not being reduced to simplified models that enforce or impose predetermined templates. So at first, we wrote about our framework as a model for analyzing, but that didn't come across well. I mean, for my writing, our explorative position that we assumed would characterize the use of the model among our audience of qualitative researchers, it didn't come across very well, and the framework was interpreted as something that might impose non-beneficial work or a very reduced line of research work. And along the revisions, we developed this argument that I think characterized the value baseline of qualitative research that is very careful from research methods that is being reductive to qualitative materials that sort of adopts the interpretive act of researchers in dealing with their data. And the review process helped us a lot to reconstruct the model that we offer, to reconstruct our framework that we offer as a map. That means that this is a framework that includes multiple options for analysis for researchers. And within this framework, researchers must be active and decide by themselves which directions they can take rather than an imposed template. Another insight that has been developed during the review process also refers to the way you actually write a methodological paper, especially in the context of ORM. So after a few years of very intensive work, where we created a framework where we worked on our empirical markers that lead or that sort of construct the intersection between our dimensions and the levels of analysis that Linda described before and the principles of analysis. We send our first a manuscript which we felt that sort of presents our tool in the best way. And we learned during the review process that we really must sort of correspond with the methodological literature to make it clear, as we do in an empirical paper, actually, what is the methodological literature that we actually sort of that is our audience. In what way the framework that we offer sort of overlaps or discusses or corresponds with existing broader methodological literature. That's an angle or perspective that we didn't come with in advance when we started the review process. I mean,
I think Avital captures these two lessons of, first of all, be committed and show the commitment within qualitative literature and methodological literature to these principles of allowing researchers flexibility and not creating templates and not adding another template. And the second that Avital mentioned that I also appreciated was corresponding with the methodological literature and not just coming with a method. So also making sure that the paper corresponds with the literature, with the methodological literature. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that was very insightful to not impose a certain template on qualitative research, but rather providing options and recommendations for scholars when they engage in this very rich and in-depth process of research. And I know that Avital touch on it a little bit briefly when we talk about the like motivations of the paper, but what are your current evaluations of the research around, analyzing social interactions in organizations, considering multiple aspects of the context of the relationships that it's outside just the content of the interactions?
Qualitative researchers would understand that social interactions are much more than just the content of what being said. They are characterized by a very deep and broad wealth of processes that are constructing interactions, and we can learn so much more than just analyzing the content. We can learn so much more about organization doing so. So in order to create or to be able to produce qualitative rich data analysis that could elicit good theories or nuanced theories, we need a data analysis process that examines other aspects of interactions, or at least considers their relevance for the analyzing process. And that's something we saw that doesn't characterize other streams of research, or at least it doesn't offer that comprehensive look and that variety of options like this framework provides.
Also, in terms of where the field is at, I think there's space for it. I think there's space for looking at other dimensions. I think it's easiest. It's the easiest thing to do to focus on the content, but I think like as far as like methodological papers and calls by major scholars in our field, there is space both for analyzing interactions and not just interviews, and for analyzing within interactions these different dimensions of the interaction and looking at these different modalities. There's a lot of methods, pieces, or papers that beyond ours that also call for applying this multimodal gaze. I also want to say something about making reflexive choices about the analysis that we choose. I think, and that also speaks to our field. So reflexivity has become a criterion of quality in qualitative research, and it's connected to transparency and truthworthiness of the research. And as qualitative scholars, we make interpretive choices all the time, and these choices unveil certain opportunities and understandings and obscures others. As we ourselves started analyzing interactional materials of our own studies, it was very easy to fall into the taken for granted understandings of interaction as the content of what is said or observed. For me, as a back then institutional scholar, observe the interaction from that point of view, that level of analysis, and to be able to reflectively choose your method for analyzing interaction, you need to familiarize yourself with the multiple options that are there so that you're able to choose the analytic path that is most suitable for your inductive findings or also for your theoretical stance. And this is something that the methodological literature has discussed quite a bit, this need for reflexivity within qualitative research in particular. And the need to reflexively choose what we are doing and to be able to communicate it. And so by developing, this is connected to what Avital said before, by developing our own map, we also realize the value of maps to qualitative research methods more broadly. You see, methodological knowledge is becoming vaster and expands across multiple disciplines and field of knowledge and expertise. And this makes it difficult for scholars to familiarize themselves with the full range of the literature and make reflexive choices. And templates are one solution for this multiplicity. Templates provide structure and practical guidance, but we know that templates also reduce reflexive choices. So in this context, we advocate for maps, such as the ones that we develop. Maps bear a lot of information about the possibilities and the surroundings, and they allow us to navigate between these possibilities and reflexively decide which path to take. This understanding can be applied to other contexts beyond social interaction. So, for example, ways of collecting data in ethnographies, or we can think of different I think the different questions or challenges that there on which we have a lot of knowledge already, but this vast range of knowledge sometimes is confusing. And to make reflexive choices, maps can be a way to hold this multiplicity and at the same time to allow scholars to make reflexive choices.
Yes, and I think that's very insightful to encourage scholars to be more transparent, but also provide more space for reflexivity in the process of collecting the data and also in the process of writing the results and the findings and finalize the paper as well. So with that, do you have any recommendations for scholars who are interested in studying social interactions or just qualitative research in general?
You want to take that, Avital?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we highly recommend that people would take interaction seriously. That means not settle for interviews materials when we write our papers. So taking interaction, whoever takes interaction seriously can use our framework to get exposed to the different analytical possibilities that we offer and choose among them. And in doing so, a framework allows to take into account other dimensions, such not only content, but also communication patterns and emotions and roles, and the various levels of analysis, and the individual, the dyadic level, at the group, the organizational level, and the societal level, and to be able to choose among the different levels and dimensions of analysis. I think the structure of our paper helps very much to do so, because in the paper we separate between a table that we offer analytical question to each intersection between each cell and we offer analytical questions for every intersection between dimensions of analysis and level of analysis, and we have a different table where we offer empirical markers. So what we recommend is first to use the table with the analytical questions, so one can, just briefly go over them and see what's relevant for one's research. And after that, you could use the empirical markers table, and that could actually that holds references and to papers that are relevant, and then you can actually go to the intersections between the of the cells that are relevant for one's paper. So if I'm doing a research on roles at the group level, I would actually look at the analytical question in that intersection, and also in the empirical markers. I think that's about it.
I would also say, yeah, I agree completely. I'd also say, enjoy the interactions you collect and analyze, because this is such an interesting process to analyze interactions. Don't settle only on what is said or what is expressed, but also on what is not said and not expressed overtly. And this is also something that we try to, elaborate on the particular analytical markers for these things as well. So look beyond the overt aspects of the interaction. Always look at the context of what is happening. Yeah, and I think generally the paper and the framework is our suggestion for how to analyze it, or to be able to choose from these different possibilities. But most of all, enjoy this process, because it's a very long process. It takes a lot of time to do beyond what is obvious. But I think it's usually very fruitful, and it allows us to develop better theories and to have better papers and more interesting papers and more vivid papers. Yeah, so that connects back to what Avital said about not losing interactions as we're trying to speed up our process of writing, etc., and still remain faithful to the social environment is a lot about interactions.
All the juicy stuff is always within interactions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think it's really helpful to have the questions to help scholar consider different aspects of the interactions. And also, as Linda mentioned, the joy of this research, of exploring, of staying curious about different layers of the interactions that are between not just the participants, but also between the scholars and the participants as well.
Maybe one last thing for the recommendations for scholars interested in analyzing interactions. I would also say that it is very also easy to fall into the analytic trap of claiming things without having substantial evidence, substantial way of convincing of what we claim that we see in the interaction. So the moment that we go away from that we move from the more obvious, explicit aspects of interactions, we go into this land where we can make different claims. And I think for rigorous research, we need a path of evidence. Rogers et al., there's a beautiful chapter actually from 1999 talking about that, talking about this trail of evidence that we need to look for to be able to be convincing. And this is also, I want to say, this is also something that we try to do. We try to elaborate on this possible trail of, or how can we get to that possible trail of evidence. Yeah, it's not evidence, but everything is interpretation, right? But still being able to be convincing about it.
Yes, and for my final question is, what do you think are some future research directions for moving this research forward?
I just had a retreat today at the university about AI, so I'm thinking, what interactions are something that require observations, but there is more and more methods that capture, like video methods and other methods. I mean, would there be ways to capture interactions in the future with AI and to analyze them in this way? I mean, I'm not sure that's a direction for future research, but that's something that, of course, we didn't touch upon in our paper, but qualitative research has more and more AI-driven tools for interpretation, like Atlas AI and other tools. I mean, I wonder how would that influence in the future. And another just pops into my mind is that virtual interactions that has become more and more common in post-COVID and yeah, dramatic circumstances world we live in, this part of the world. How, I mean, when we analyze virtual interactions, there's something else to look into, how to apply our model when studying virtual interactions. Yeah, I'm not sure that that's a valid venue for future research, but comes to my mind. Linda, you have something to say?
Maybe just saying again something about the value of maps. I think that it's not relating to future research around social interactions, but qualitative research more generally. So definitely we need to construct methods for understanding the societal challenges and how we deal with them, and maybe more exact methods for that speak to these challenges. And I think that AI and our data-driven world offers a lot, and still it is very hard to make sense and to have a coherent understanding of everything that the world offers, and also methodologically. And maps, I think, are a good metaphor for capturing ways of exposing different understandings, different ways of doing things, and at the same time allowing scholars to choose their path. So more maps, I would say.
Yes, I think it's very insightful to mention the integrations, the impact of technology, right? Not just AI tools, but also the virtual interactions, such as one that we have right now. What are the impacts that it will have? What are the differences it will bring into the interactions? But also using maps as framework that not box scholars into certain templates, but allow scholars to elaborate, to explore the pathways that they can consider in their research.